I'm Spencer Jakab. I'm the author of The Revolution That Wasn't. And I'm panicked about GameStop mania.
K-Nut, how you feeling?
I'm feeling just fine. How are
What are
you?
you fidgeting with over there?
Nothing at all.
Can you imagine what it's like to be me?
No.
It's disgusting, and I've hit an age. I woke up today. There's 3 different age spots in the worst possible places. I can't even look at a photo of myself because people must be on the other end go zooming in on these photos and go, "What the fuck's wrong with that guy? How much sun did he sit in?" I'm so mad at myself for my mistakes as a child, Knut. Our sins as ASU students and sun gods at playing golf without lotion and hat.
Yeah, that'll do it to you.
I have nothing else to say. Do we have a show today? Do we have a guest?
We have a show.
Okay,
and
so we have a guest. Phew. Because sometimes we come up and you haven't organized us and we have no guests and then we don't do a podcast.
Huh. Oh, well, that'll never happen again.
Luckily, this time I got the guest.
Yes, thank God.
And it's a special guest because we are going to talk about stuff that's fascinating to me. I rarely do that. I'm fascinated by the people, but I don't understand half the tough stuff we talk about because I'm in the process of learning, whether it's crypto or trading. But on this is near and dear to my heart because we have a true journalist. Not that he went to journalism school, which makes him, I think, a true journalism. He learned on the job. He was an analyst at Credit Suisse. He spent the last 10 years. He was at the Financial Times for a while, which you can't, no matter how many clicks or how many subscriptions you have, you can't get into a fucking article at the Financial Times. I hope they die. A spam machine. And Credit Suisse, hope they die. They're terrible people, terrible products with their triple Lindy inverse ETS. But he's moved on from there. And so now I only hate his current slave master, Rupert Murdoch. He is really one of the good guys, Spencer Jakab. We've hung out a lot. He's always been supportive of community. He understands what it's like to build brand and how hard it is in the financial world to survive. He has written a book. I never sell books, but this book is awesome. I've never sold a book on this 200 podcasts, so I think hopefully he'll be excited that I'm pitching it and don't screw it up. But it's called The Revolution That Wasn't. GameStop, Reddit, and the fleecing. Again, I don't like that word, but we'll get into that. And the fleecing of small investors. My hypothesis, and we'll get into it, is that investors are going to get fleeced. Doesn't matter who did it. If we don't do it, someone else is going to do it, right? And so the poster child, and whether they've handled it good or bad, we'll talk to that, is a company near and dear to my kids' net worth, Robinhood. So...
Mine too.
So, yeah, fleecing only meant to me before, a Patagonia fleece jacket. Now it's a book. So Spencer will be here on the stand defending his book, although it's a great book, and he means well, and he's right about a lot of what's in this book, because we didn't get what we were hoping for, and that's, I think, what this book is about. And most importantly to Spencer, because I read him all the time, and again, I'll be honest with you, everybody writes headlines to get clicks, so even everybody does this, and I sometimes click through links, and I'm so mad, and I'll say something so mean, and I find out a friend of mine wrote the article. Spencer's been on the other end of that a few times.
Oops.
And so he writes the Herd on the Street column, which is read by millions of people. Red, blue, white, black. Everybody reads Herd on the Street. So that's like one of the most famous financial columns. There's a lot of respect and pride, just like Saturday Night Live, that goes into that column. So please welcome Spencer Jakab, if he's still here. Spencer, the odds of Rupert listening to this, between 0 and 1?
I mean, the odds are never 0, but let's put it very close to 0. This is a kind of... I'm going to hope not. You know,
I hope you had enough power to get it in the 90s, but you're really saying it's close to 0. Is that his superpower? He does not care?
Well, I will tell you, and I'm not his spokesman or whatever, and I can say whatever I want, really. But when it comes to news coverage, Rupert Murdoch lets the chips fall where they will. You remember Bad Blood and the whole Theranos scandal, for example. He had
Because his name was on the cap table, right?
right. Well, he had a significant financial stake in that, and they approached him to kill the story. John Carreiro, my former colleague, who blew that one open, and he didn't do anything. He didn't mention it.
What a book! What a movie too!
Oh,
or
my
what
God.
I'm loving every bit of this.
Yeah, and
She was
I mean,
psycho.
so he's a at the end of the day, he does not interfere in stuff like that. This is something I've written about. My column has written about. I wrote a book about it. I spent the last year and a half, immersed in it. I don't think he has any dog in this fight, but if he did, I don't think that he would care. I think he cares about us being ethical. There's the opinion side of the paper, and people often, kind of give me a hard time, or they give me a backslap for what's on the opinion side of the paper, which is editorially separate from the news division. News reports to a different person. My boss is Matt Murray, who's the editor of the paper. He has nothing to do with the opinion pages. That's a separate reporting line. So
Right.
you can complain about that, but don't complain about it to me or to him.
Oh, I don't complain. I just don't read. And I think I don't read because I don't feel like I'm not a news person, and news would just depress me. So let's talk about the markets and finance and what's near and dear to your heart on the street. How important, like that is like the Bible of the Wall Street Journal. How cool is that? What's that like? What's the pressure like?
I mean, the pressure is like anything in journalism. I like it. This is really what I wanted to do. I worked in finance. I took a pretty huge pay cut to get into financial journalism with the ultimate goal of doing something like this. I thought that research was dying. I was a top-rated research analyst, and my boss couldn't believe it the day I walked into his office to quit 20 years ago, and I wanted to write for Lex or write for Heard on the Street, and to be editor of the Heard on the Street column. It's a team of 14 people around the globe. It's great. I love it. My people are so smart. Heard on the Street, has gone through several reincarnations, but it's been around for a century almost, and and the current incarnation is the best. I think it's kind of been, in this kind of, financial analysis and economic analysis and opinion since 2008, basically. Used to be more of a tip sheet. I think it's a great read. It's a full page of the print paper for those people who still get it every day. It's pressure to put that together, but it's a joy too. It's a pleasure.
Are you an online guy, or do you still like to flex the paper on the subway?
I'm old-fashioned. I'm not as old as you, but I'm almost as old as you. And
no. No one's as old as me.
Well, I mean, at the Wall Street Journal, I'm almost like Methuselah there, whatever.
Wow,
So I'm in
yeah.
my 50s. But I mean, I like the print paper. I miss the print paper because I don't get it here. Many days I work from home now since COVID, and there's serendipity in reading the paper, right? Because you're turning
Your
the
eyes
pages,
flow differently. You're seeing how it was meant to be laid out.
and you're getting to the thing that you wanted to read, and you might notice something that you had no intention of reading that you pick up. And the really useful stuff in the paper, as much as Heard on the Street is useful, the really useful stuff in the paper is on page 812. It's something, it's not the headline, it's something that's a small news item like
Working its way to page one, maybe.
Right. Odd pneumonia found in Wuhan in China, right? In December 2019. Well, that turned out to be a pretty big story. Defaults rising in Orange County in California. Stuff like that isn't at the front page yet. That's when it's really useful to somebody in finance. So you don't get that if you're zeroing in on something, it's more efficient to be reading it on the iPhone or whatever, but it can be more useful.
That's a good tip. So you're saying, as cynical as I am, what would it cost me to have it delivered every day to my house?
Gee,
By you.
By me.
Just by some rando.
I think it's not cheap anymore. I think it's but I think it's like
300?
I think it's less than 200 a year to get the physical paper. Unfortunately it's going away. It's expensive for us to do that, and the fewer people that read it, the more it costs. The printing has been consolidated and whatever. But it's if it's worth it to you, I mean, to get the print Barron's, to get the print Wall Street Journal, the print even the Financial Times, which is very expensive now. It's worth it because you'll see those stories that you weren't looking for.
So a smart person who just wants to be a little bit on the nose should just go whip it open, go to 812, and just kind of think about things. That's how you would start the day.
Absolutely. I'm a real student of financial history. And
Yeah.
so I will look back at like key turning points in markets. I mean, I'll go back to 1929. I'll go back to 2007. I'll go back to 1999 and read through stories then. And you got no clue as to what was about to happen. Or at the bottoms at 2009, 2002, 1932. There was no clue as to the immense turning point that was then occurring, right? But if you go into the back pages, there are lots of clues, and so that's where you find somebody could have sussed this out, but not from the things that the editors of the day felt were the most important stories.
Okay, great. Which leads me to this topic today, because you just really offered me a nice segue into what this show should be about, and I'll have you on often if you're willing after this.
Sure, yeah.
Because I just love talking about this, and no one's going to hear my takes that I'm willing to share them with, and I think I'm willing to share them with you because you'll be neutral and tell me where I'm right and where I'm wrong. But this brings us to your book, The Revolution That Wasn't. You obviously had to turn this out pretty quickly. So let me give you some background on how I think about this, because obviously I want you to describe the book, and I just read it. The GameStop thing happens, right? You and I as market historians or market, we just live and breathe the markets. It's just like a magical moment. It was going to to me, it was just going to happen. Like if you told me in March of 2020 when my LPs were yelling at me for sending out a capital call, like, I was like, not on purpose, but certain, people were freaking out. It was as close to a freak out as you could get. But tech did its thing, or the miracle of tech allowed us to survive it in ways that no one thought we could in March 2020. And I always knew Robinhood was inevitable, whatever the name was going to be whether it was eToro or Twitter creating a brokerage or Robinhood. I just knew it was coming. Mm-hmm. You couldn't have told me that would have been the amp up point. You know what I mean? Like, there's no way I would have pressed my bet in March 2020 on Robinhood, of all things. But that was a moment when culture meets time meets Fed. I don't know. It was a cocktail of explosion for certain things. Sports gambling, even though sports were shut down, ping pong on DraftKings. So how did it feel to you at that moment? Do you remember? And when did the idea of the book come?
Yeah. So sitting around at the Wall Street Journal in early 2020 when we were still in the office, and then as we all went home, you would read things like, Wall Street, like some stock would go up. And you're like, why did that go up? Let's look for news. Do you see any news? I don't see any news. And like, oh yeah, they're talking about it on Wall Street Bets. And it was just a joke, right? It was to me anyway, because, at Hurt on the Street, we're not really writing about small caps and micro caps. And then, Hertz is bankrupt and then ostensibly worthless, in April or May 2020. And then it goes up 200%. Like, why is the stock of this ostensibly worthless company going up? Oh, and they're selling stock. And so it didn't rise to the level of writing about, but it rose to the level of kind of laughing about it. And that's how a lot of Wall Street looked at it too, much to its later regret. At least a few people really regretted it, you'll read about in my story. When it first occurred to me, it was late. So I have three boys. My oldest boy is 23. He was a college senior when this is happening. Home, he started the semester late because of COVID. It was January 25th, 2021. He came over to me and he said, "Dad, are you writing something about GameStop?" I was like, "No, why would I be?" I've driven him to GameStop a lot, obviously, I have three sons who really love video games. But why would I be writing about it? So I took a look at it. It's up 200% in the past few days. And I said, "Well, why are you asking?" And my friend Sean bought the stock. And I said, so I do a bit of clicking. Well, they're talking about it on Wall Street Bets. And in my past experience, this might be an opportune moment to take profits, just giving Sean a little free advice there because, these things kind of peak pretty quickly. And he said, no, Sean is not going to sell. He can't sell. And that piqued my interest. What do you mean he can't sell? Like he can't sell it? And he said, no. That's the whole idea is that you can't sell it. So I read the board some more. And within 10 minutes, I saw that something was happening that had not happened in probably a century, which was an attempted stock market corner. And that was fascinating to me because you basically, it's not legal anymore, as you know, Howard, for two or three hedge funds to get together and gang up on a fourth hedge fund because they're short a stock, i.e. they're kind of exposed to unlimited losses.
Coyotes. They're coyotes.
But you can't do that. You can't legally collude to do that. But here were several 100,000 people doing it out in the open, not behind closed doors, on a message board. I was looking at all the messages going back to October and November. Like, holy crap, they're squeezing these guys, and they're giving them very little exit. This can get very, very ugly. It already was ugly. Melvin Capital lost almost $7 billion in a few days, and other people lost lots of money. And to me, that was incredible. So that was my first thought.
Well, now it's happening in nickel. It's happened now in different proxies.
It has, but you can do it in commodities, right? But and it happened in silver in 1980.
In
Famous
Volkswagen,
story.
I think, right? There was
By
a Volkswagen
accident in Volkswagen.
Okay, by
where
accident.
Porsche screwed up and did it by accident there because they were stupid, and they created a corner where there was not enough stock to buy to cover the short. But this was happening with deliberate purpose, and it was happening in order to inflict pain. So these people thought that they were on Wall Street Bets, thought they were getting a twofer, which was to bankrupt hedge funds and make a ton of money at the same time. It didn't quite work out that way because they thought they were going to really blow a hole in Wall Street. They didn't like Wall Street. They didn't like people who put on suits and go to work on Wall Street. They didn't hate rich people because they liked...
By the way, do they know that... This is what's so funny because I get hated on as a suit, and I'm like, I fucking stopped wearing a suit before you did.
Right.
Which is funny how they call it suits and apes. I just have such a bone to pick with the way they think about things.
But so this generation, you have to understand, and that this is a key part of the thing, is that this generation... and I'm talking about, let's say, and it's about 80% males between the ages of 18 and 35, that were involved in this. Their formative memories were Wall Street. My parents lost their house, or my friends' parents' friends lost their house, or I couldn't pay my student loans, whatever. Wall Street is the bad guy. This is great. I can inflict massive pain on Wall Street and make a buck. And another fascinating thing about this is several things had to happen all pretty much in conjunction for this story to happen at all. It's not just the story of what happened in January 2021. It's that story of what started happening a few months before the pandemic until that time. Lots of things had to happen all at once. For example, the spread of app-based gambling on your phone, gambling being legalized in most states, sports gambling, which young men especially love to do in 2018. Then you had every broker imitating Robinhood in late 2019 going to $0 commissions. Then you had the pandemic and lockdowns and sports disappearing and more than 10 million retail brokerage accounts being opened by people who had too little, most of them had too little money for brokers to have bothered with in the past. But with fractional shares and with $0 commissions, all of a sudden it was this fun new game for all these people bored and stuck at home and who didn't like Wall Street. And then GameStop became this opportunity. It was like a perfect setup for this thing to happen. It could not have happened at a different time without all those things happening at once. And then social media played a massive role. And the algorithmic nature, it wasn't like a Yahoo message board, which I naively thought that Reddit was like just an amped up version of that, but it's not. Social media, TikTok, but
because you know StockTwits from the beginning, you know what it's like.
Exactly. And and Howard, hats off. You saw that and you understood that investing in Robinhood.
I knew it was coming. I didn't know how it would manifest.
But you saw the overlap. You saw the crossover, and having it both on your smartphone made this possible. So that is just a fascinating story. And then the personalities who made it possible also are fascinating. It might have happened without them, but it wouldn't have been as big without a few people who were kind of accidental heroes in this whole story. Yeah.
Well, there'll be a lot of books written. Yours is going to be the best because it was thoughtful and you didn't rush it out, right? Like there was movies, I got pitched movies and I'm like, guys, you're missing the story. The story's just beginning. You can't frame it as a game. This has been brewing and this is just the beginning. And so now we have heroes and villains. You use the word fleece. Is that to sell title? Why? Here's my issue with the way this works. So it's a great cover. Everything's great. I don't have a bone to pick except the word fleece.
Right.
And let's get into the word because it's a nasty word. It's like fraud. And so I'm trying to thinking, because because this has happened before with E-Trade and Thundering Herd of Merrill Lynch and Yahoo Finance and the message boards and then Street.com and Raging Bull. And then we had nothing. We had nothing, right? '01 happened and we had nothing, right?
Right.
And my inspiration was YouTube when I started Wall Street, and then Twitter. You know, I left CBS to go start StockTwits because I was like, Twitter is the fucking pulse. Like I was called Fred Wilson. I'm like, dude, this is the shit. This is the pipe that every hedge fund's paying as much money as they can to get as close to the Fed as possible, completely distributed, right? That's my frustration. If you talk about fleecing, if I use the word fleece and they didn't do it on purpose, it's the Twitter board fleecing investors for choosing the wrong business model. Because Twitter is all these things. This shit all went down in real time on Twitter. They missed the whole fucking, this happened on Wall Street bets. This should have been happening on Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter.
This happened on Robinhood. Robinhood should be Twitter should be the broker. There shouldn't be a Robinhood.
Well, you were the one who introduced the dollar
sign
thing. Yeah, I mean, that was,
No, but what I'm saying is, when I hear fleece, this is why people go, why are you so mad at Twitter? I'm like, well, you use the word fleece. If the fucking management dropped the ball, they could, and that's what's exciting about Elon Musk. They could drop everything. They could drop all their ads and charge Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, all these people hundreds of millions of dollars for access and give it everybody else to free, and everybody would happily pay, and Twitter would survive with 200 employees. So when I think of fleece, I think of that. I don't think Robinhood, DraftKings, these people woke up, Coinbase, FTX, wake up thinking they're going to fleece investors. They're using technology, using UI and design. So where does the word fleecing mean to you?
So I don't want to go down too deep of a rabbit hole. The title and the subtitle.
No, I don't know why. I just want to know how the context of who got fleeced.
The theme of the book is that there is a long, long history of investors deluding themselves by thinking that they can get one over on Wall Street. And the times when most people think that are the worst times to be invested. And so the word fleece was a subject of some debate between me and Penguin Random House, the publisher of this book. I kind of won half the argument. I don't think that maybe it's the best word, but investors do get fleeced. I mean, for sure.
Yeah.
But they fleece themselves primarily.
Correct.
Right. And Wall Street is all too happy to give them enough rope to hang themselves. And I'll tell you just a little. I don't want to take up too much time, like going into my own story, but like, why did I take this massive pay cut to become a journalist? Well, it's a much more interesting job. But when I was, I think I was the youngest managing director in the equity department of my bank, was CS First Boston then. It wasn't Credit Suisse. But, I wore nice suits and whatever. I didn't even know what an investment bank was. My parents were refugees. They came to the U.S. with no money and no knowledge, no English in their 20s. We didn't know anybody who worked on Wall Street. I kind of got into it by accident. And, the kid, told me like, I should take some classes at Columbia. I was doing a master's at Columbia Business School because, I could get a really good job as an investment bank analyst. And I was like, okay, sure. And I loved the subject matter. I became fascinated with it and got into an investment bank completely by accident. Had no, I was really just attracted to it by the kind of the money and the excitement and being at the center of attention. And I would go home. I remember I was like probably a director or maybe a managing director at the time, maybe a director, I guess, right before, months before the dot-com crash. And was living in London and nice suits, everything, making a lot of money. Probably the only kid of my parents' friends who all were in the same situation in terms of being refugees and whatever, and having scrimped and saved, who knew anything about the stock market. And they start asking me questions. I'm home with my son, who's now 23. My oldest son was a newborn. So this was 23 years ago. And they're asking me all these questions about this and that, Internet Incubator and, whatever. It's a lot of companies that don't even exist anymore, and Cisco and Lucent. What do I think? And they made so much money in the stock. And I'm like, listen, you guys don't need to be doing this. And I really don't recommend it. And you have how much of your money in this? Like, I really would just take money off the table. And they didn't want to hear it. And over the years, many people have not wanted to hear it when they thought that they were smarter than, they were taking advice from CNBC. And that planted the seed of leaving that world and getting into financial journalism where I could do some good. Interestingly enough, now all these years later, 20 plus years later, people even though I'm more experienced and know a few more things, people are less interested in taking my advice because what do I know about money? I'm a financial journalist. I mean, I make much less than those people on Wall Street, so clearly I don't know what I'm talking about. So, I mean, I've seen so many cases personally of people just blowing massive holes, in some cases losing their homes, losing their retirements, having to go back to work because they thought that they were very smart at those precise times that the market made them feel like geniuses. And the run up to GameStop mania was exactly a time like that for a whole new cohort of investors. So I feel very strongly about it. If fleecing is not the right word, delusion, right? I mean, you've got to admit that people felt like geniuses when they, it was very easy to, and they shouldn't have. And there's a whole part of Wall Street that made them, that was all too happy to take their money, that said, hey, no commissions, step right up, right? But they're making lots of money. They were making more money than ever during this whole period by these young people who didn't know better getting into the market and buying crypto and trading 1,000 times, or some of them trading 10,000 times a year. It's stupid.
Definitely stupid. But my struggle here is like, who are the villains and who aren't? In the end of all this, the frustrating part for me when I look back at a career of trying to change or be a part or disrupt or evolve or just make money off this trend of the next E-Trade, the next CNBC, the next whatever, the next Wall Street Journal. Here we are in 2022, and Goldman Sachs is strong, if not stronger than ever. JP Morgan is strongest, strong and not ever. Warren Buffett, strongest, strong. You know what I mean? For all the bitching about tech giants, the old group still exists. It's very frustrating. So it's like I try and defend. It's just funny how, like, when I read how they want to blame the new people for doing this, it just seems like I know where your angle's coming from. It's just an interesting choice of word because it really just comes down to fear and greed. People are stupid when it comes to their own fear and greed, and they chase things and they have FOMO. And, part of this comes down to people learning this language. So, the best thing about this, for all the wrong reasons people did GameStop and all the mistakes that, let's say, Robinhood or the SEC has made, and we at least onboarded another 50, 100 million people to the idea of investing. Do we agree there?
Yeah, and I think
terrible?
those people will fall into three groups. I mean, so there's a retirement crisis in this country, and when does the retirement crisis start? Like you hear all these articles about people who are 60 years old and haven't saved anything or have $10,000 saved. Well, that's not going to last you very long, buddy. Good luck with Social Security. When did that crisis start? It didn't start when they were 60. It started when they were 25.
Correct.
They missed out on all those decades.
Like climate change, it'll slowly happen, and then it's just
right. It started with the steam engine, right? So, yeah. I mean, and so it's good. I that's the one hopeful thing, and I say that in the book, that all these young people at least got a ladder on their foot on the ladder financially.
Correct.
And you know what? Some of them learned painful lessons, and sometimes, and I've spoken with many people who said, you know what, I bought Enron, or I did this, or I did that, or I bought a penny stock, and you have a painful early lesson, and in terms of dollars, in terms of percentage of your net worth, it might be high, but in terms of dollars that you'll make in your life, it's not very high. Good for you, you get on the straight and narrow. But I think the young people who got into stock investing will fall into three groups. One group will be like that, and will say, like, you know what, I know what I don't know. I have an account. And the soundest thing for most people to do is not to try to beat the market. I mean, you'll beat 85% of people by buying index funds and just and checking it infrequently, not checking it 7 times a day like Robinhood typical customers do. One group of those people will continue to try to speculate because the gambling bug bit them. And I mean, gambling, I'm using that word deliberately. And they will have a very tough time. They'll pay a very heavy toll to Wall Street. Yeah. And
time.
And time, exactly. And time is the most important.
Time's worse than the money.
Yeah. And then I think some small minority, I mean, there's this whole crazy cuckoo kind of subculture now of it's not over, the game's not over, there's going to be the mother of all short squeezes. I don't know if you just type in MOASS into a browser and see what comes up, and it's like a whole, and they think that they've been cheated, and this stems from what happened to Robinhood. Robinhood did a pretty poor job of explaining initially, and I understand why they did, because they were in a real dire straits for a few days there. It's an innocent explanation, but it seems like a conspiracy because it served some people so well that they had to prevent their clients from buying any more of the meme stocks on January 28th because they got a $3 million cash call in the middle of the night, which they couldn't possibly meet.
It's a conspiracy story that is just a real one. They got fucked. That's how the system works sometimes.
Well, they fucked themselves, right? Because they did too good of a job getting people excited, and the people just happened to get excited all about the same stocks.
Yeah.
And the clearinghouse called them up and said, listen, kind of our risk models are showing you need to put up $3 million of cash to make sure that you're good for this. And they couldn't do that. And so they said, well, how about if we don't allow our clients to buy anymore? And that they could just about cover it then. And it seems very convenient, but there is no conspiracy there, right? So there's no conspiracy to help hedge funds. It's just keeping themselves in business, which is
correct.
And I explain it in my book. That's probably the most boring chapter of my book. All these exciting chapters.
It's the most boring, but the best. This was just survival.
It was, exactly. And I have to explain that. But there's some subgroup of these people who are still consumed by this. And there's dark pools, and there's this, and they're hiding the shorts, and I get so much hate mail, Howard. It's like I whatever. It's part of I get hate mail anyway for my job.
But this I got rando drive-bys on StockTwits, even though I started it, and then Robinhood, which brought so much joy, and then the small select few that feel that they got ripped off. I hear their pain, but they are wasting their energy. There's so many more other enemies out there.
Right.
Including themselves in this business. And themselves being the biggest enemy. No one put a gun to their head to own GameStop. Just because it's going up and you think there's a short squeeze. People had no exit. Not that I'm condoning any behavior by anybody in this thing, but this is just bad investing.
Well, it's bad investing, but I mean, I don't know. Are you sitting down, Howard?
Yeah.
I know.
I'm always sitting.
You don't have a weak heart or anything.
No.
Okay, I'm just going to lay this on you. There might have been some gambling going on Robinhood.
Yes,
there might have been. Right.
But
so
if it hadn't gone on Robinhood, what's funny to me is, and I'll come back to your thought there, sort of interrupt, is that DraftKings and FanDuel have no oversight, and those kids. It's just amazing when I see, because I was a fan for an hour or two of Barstool, but to see how reckless that guy is, and this goes to the media and Twitter and all the problems of shameless behavior, to see whatever's the kids from Barstool, what's his name?
Dave Portnoy,
Yeah, just lose the script and be so conflicted at a moment where he had everybody. He just fell into the same trap as Kramer and all these people, like acting as if he knows how the markets work. And picking the villain and leading his own people into pen gaming at 100, 120, 130. I don't even know where the stock is. But these people were brokerages without SEC oversight. A kid goes home on a Sunday, bets on a sporting game, and is miserable all week because he doesn't have food money. And that's DraftKings and FanDuel all week.
Okay, but there's a fine line between that and I know you're an early backer and whatever, but
no, it's the same
between that
thing.
and Robinhood, it's the same exact emotions. And the thing is that so on the one hand, what I point out in the book is that fear and greed have always been there. Human psychology is unchanged from Neolithic times, right? Which is makes us such bad investors. It's going to change very, very slowly. It will take many generations to make us be able to survive in this financial jungle better. But what has changed and what is different now is that companies are much better at understanding human psychology, much better at pushing our buttons. And that it includes social media that has nothing to do with finance. It just happens to, finance is just adjacent to it, right? On Reddit and YouTube and TikTok, where these influencers have shown up and started their stuff. And apps like eToro and Webull and Robinhood, where they're very good at using the fonts and the colors and the FOMO and the showing you things that get you to be active. So they're good at pushing your buttons. And the resemblance between that and FanDuel, between Robinhood and FanDuel, is not coincidental. They look really
Not
similar.
coincidental
Howard.
at all. But let's be honest, 99, E-Trade, Schwab were just the same things on desktops with all the bells and whistles and sounds and
Yeah,
alerts.
but these guys are much better, and it's on a smartphone. I
Oh.
mean, the friction is so much less, which is the...
Yeah, but whose fault is that? Like, that's just technology. This stuff was going to happen.
Right.
I'm not trying to defend myself, because when I invested in Robinhood, the idea was, oh my God, like if you build it, they will come. I didn't think far enough. I was getting laughed at because the world was wealth front, and, let's index. And I was like, the VCs don't get it. Like, it's a nice little idea, but it's not a venture business. Whereas
Right.
Robinhood, to me, I was only investing. I was getting laughed out of the room because, like, how are you going to make money? I was just saying, no, if they build this, people will come. I could not have foreseen GameStop and how they did options and the game effect. I couldn't have seen that. To me, it just looked like a beautiful way to connect to a brokerage and to buy a share of stock. That's why I invested. Right. What it has become, how could I control that?
Well, I think if Robinhood had not done it, then somebody else would have, of course. I mean, it's, but what I don't like are the rules, the fact that brokers regulate themselves and that Robinhood has gotten a couple of fines, including the biggest fine ever in the history of FINRA for approving people who shouldn't have been approved for options and trading and stuff like that. But there need to be some guardrails, and I don't know what the guardrails need to be. The guardrails, I think, could include just adding a little bit of friction, a little bit of cost. You can't tell somebody, hey, make your app less beautiful and less clunky. That's not going to work.
Correct.
But I think that these young people are kind of being taken advantage of by billionaires, by who built their billions or who added to their billions. From their money, I mean, Ken Griffin and people like that too. I mean, people who have, long been on Wall Street, who understand exactly what they're doing, and they're making money off of the naivete of mostly this young generation who really, don't have a lot of money, but all of a sudden it's possible to cater to them because of technology, and the fact that Robinhood goes out and says, whenever you criticize them, we're just democratizing finance. How can you stand in the way of that? And wrap themselves in the American flag. Finance is, because of these technological changes, finance has been democratized. It used to be very hard to get on the ladder, and today it's very easy and cheap to get on the financial ladder, which is a great development, which I talk about in my book. I'm all for that. But then people sort of, it's like, having a smartphone, Howard, right? I mean, having a smartphone, you have all the world's knowledge in your hand, and teenagers are just as stupid as they were 50 years ago, right? I mean, and you have all this great knowledge,
maybe
stupider. Right. And I mean, right. You still don't know what the Magna Carta is. And so you can have the technology, but it doesn't mean that you'll use it for good.
So where are we today? You can't but at the same time, the old guys are playing. Credit Suisse has triple leverage ETFs that the SEC has approved. These are weapons of mass destruction. These are built to destroy. Robinhood was built to onboard. The old guard is building products to destroy, approved by the SEC. So this is never ending. I think what we have to do as books like yourselves is remind people that gambling is a real problem. Guns aren't a problem. Bullets are a problem. You know what I mean? Like shooting people, like being, you know what I mean? Like we could have these arguments all day in America. I'm kind of in the center on all this. I'm like, oh my God, we need people to invest. We need people to build. But when do we decide someone's an adult, and how do we educate these people, right, beyond the Magna Carta? Because Google solves a lot of education problems. You can fucking Google it. So in a world where you can Google it, it is sad that people seem to be acting dumber than ever.
Well, Howard, I'm at a loss. I do have some thoughts. I mean, education, you'll have a company will get in trouble, right? You'll have Vlad Tenev, testifying to Congress. They'll say, what we need is more education. Education is kind of a cop-out, because what's the education? Here's how to do an iron condor in the options market. I mean, that's not the kind of education that people need. The kind of education people need is like, listen, people, for example, I mean, here's a basic lesson that you should tell any young person. There are two kinds of people you'll deal with in finance. They're the people who get paid up front, and they're the people who get paid on the back end. You generally want to deal with people who are like a fiduciary who get paid on the back end, right?
Absolutely.
That's a truism. Robinhood's not going to, who gets paid on the front end is not going to tell you that, right?
They are paying paid for the game.
Right.
So Vlad, listen, there's no argument. They blew it. I don't know under the pressure how I would have done, so I'm not going to judge them. But like when I invested, it was just like buy a fraction. They weren't even fractional shares. I invested because it was like, I imagine a day when everybody could buy $2 worth of Berkshire. And I was, I look at my blog post and I go, well, that happened, but sure, a lot of carnage along the way to here.
Yeah.
Vanguard had this technology 50 years ago. They knew how to fractionalize things. They just didn't open it to the regular people.
Right.
So it had to be reinvented 20 years later by the Robinhoods. And obviously crypto is taking it to the next level. So they blew it. It is kind of a bummer because that's just the media and America building something up and tearing it back down again. And so I don't know where the next chapter of that is. It's still a phenomenal product. If you had told me that when I invested in 2014, that options was going to be the way they made their money, I didn't know enough because I don't trade options or invest using options. That I would, if they'd shown me an options product to start, maybe I wouldn't have invested. You know what I mean? So you can't. It's very hard as a seed investor to see these things, and it's very easy to go after. There's a difference between, I think, again, assuming Theranos story is real, that type of fleecing,
right,
versus financial fleecing, like regular consumer financial fleecing. I mean, that was a fraud from the get-go.
Right. No, well, yeah.
And so we have to educate people. That's what I mean by education, not about iron condors, but about storytelling. This is all Jesse Livermore 2.0, right?
Yeah,
this is all fear and greed. This is all the same story, whether the person kills themselves or kills another person or blows up their own account. These stories have been told for hundreds of years.
Right. And the easiest person to fool is yourself. But the technology for doing that, for people who have a vested financial interest in doing it, is just a lot better now. And so that's what I wanted to tell in the story. And I'll be honest, the first 24 or 48 hours, I as soon as I told you the story of how I found out about this, and there was no articles about it yet. I sent an email. I had a 3/4 written book proposal about something completely different. I sent an email to the acquisitions editor at Portfolio, the imprint that did this. And I said, hey, I've got an idea for a book and this crazy thing's happening. Like, oh, do you have a proposal? Like, no. I read about this 15 minutes ago. This is happening now.
Wow.
And this is a crazy story. And to me, at first it was a financial David and Goliath story, which was a very kind of simplistic version of it. I mean, there's another book out there by Ben Mesrich, which kind of just focuses on that, which is interesting enough, but there's so much more to this, right? I mean, how did it happen? Why did it happen? And what does it mean, right? And what are the lessons to draw from it? And that's the
lessons is the key, and that's what I mean by education. You're going to get your education. Guess what it's called? Participating. Yeah. Whether it's being fleeced in a wallet, in a crypto scam, or trading options against the house and against Citadel. Come on, people, open your eyes. But that's not the education. Is the participation. And, you fall off a bike, you can't ban bikes. That's how you learn how to ride a bike. You fall a few times. If you're going to snowboard, it's way harder than skiing at the beginning. So I agree with you on guardrails. I don't know how we keep up with the technology at this point. The SEC can't keep up with. I mean, there's a Trump SPAC. For Christ's sake.
Right, no, the SEC
how do we not know? How does the SEC even allow that? Like, if we're going to talk about intention to scam, like, here's my problem: is like, what is this guy's on TV every day, Gensler? How does that get through? There is no way.
I've called up the SEC with like literal scams. Like, listen, I'm writing about this thing. I want to talk to whatever. Okay, we'll put you on with so and so. Listen, so this thing is happening and whatever, and we have no comment. Months go by. They allow the thing to go on and on and on and on and on. And hundreds of millions more lost, and then they do something. It's like they just they close the barn door after the horse is bolted. I mean, our regular FINRA and the SEC and the stock exchanges too. NASDAQ is because it's a private company. I mean, how do you allow a private company that has an interest in having all this activity and listings, but also has an investor protection function? I mean, how do you reconcile those two? Of course, they're going to go for the money. So it's horrible. It's a travesty, and so the SEC included, and the SEC is so captured by lobbyists, and they're so timid.
It really is an amazing moment in time because technology is completely, and in the connection of tens of millions of people, like that happen on Reddit, that happen on StockTwits, that happen on Twitter, that happen on Discord. We are just at the tipping point. This is just tipped. The markets may not be what you like, but the next meme stock could be Exxon, right? This is not going to change. The manifestation of this will change. The vehicle, whatever the subject is, will change. But the lesson, this is why I talk about education. This is about don't panic, don't chase, be careful about leverage, follow smart people who consistently share information, and like there's not that much you have to educate yourself, and don't do stupid things. But the tools are going to keep coming. And now crypto has made it 24/7, 365. So we're just getting started. Are you excited or about your job or journalism and stuff just before we go? And I want to come back and talk about other stuff, but like, are you excited? Is the book being received the way you liked it? Is it doing well?
The book, I mean, I get many reader emails saying, wow, what a fantastic story. You kept the pages turning. It's a great book. So that's nice to hear. It got nice reviews. It did okay. I mean, if you're reading this, go out and buy one for your mom and buy one for yourself and buy one for your friend, because it's selling okay. I think maybe calling it the revolution that wasn't, maybe just tactically, like it just sounds like now in hindsight, like nothing to see here. And there's a lot to see there, There's
a lot to see. I think the revolution is just beginning.
Yeah, I mean,
but it's easy. I wrote a book called The Wall Street Edge because the editors paid me for that. And I said, why don't we call it the Twitter trend? This was back in 2008. And they go, what's Twitter? So, my book would have sold a lot more books in hindsight if I called it the Twitter trend. But, they paid me money and they said, call it the Wall Street Edge. We paid for you. And I'm like, okay. Yeah. And the check cleared, and shame on me.
I mean, it's a counterfactual. I got paid for a book. I got paid in advance, and I'm already paid for it, and whatever, and that's fine. I don't, I could have stayed in finance and made so much more money. I mean, but I'm fine. I like journalism. Journalism is great. Journalists are great. Listen, I'm paid to talk to smart people, read stuff, write something occasionally. I have a great, super smart team. You should always have people who are smarter than you work for you, and I believe me, that's not that high of a bar to clear for me. And I have
You're right.
just said there's so many.
It's a simple idea. It's great.
Yeah, and so I really like it, and and so telling this story was great. I had to work really. I mean, I wanted to come out on the anniversary of the events, and so it was a real slog, But every night, falling asleep at the computer, every weekend, every vacation, everything, But I'm glad that it came out when it did, and I'm happy with the product. So anybody who wants to shoot me an email and give me feedback, and please do. I love to.
Easy to find you on Twitter. You're at
Spencer Jakab, SpencerJakab, as in boy, and just Google it. Revolution that wasn't Spencer Jakab. Wherever fine books are sold. You can email me at the Wall Street Journal, first name, last name at WSJ.com. Love to hear feedback, and it's a pleasure to get paid to do this.
You're in the mix, man. You're mixing it up. It's like ultimate fighting the markets. It's just digital war going on right now.
Yeah,
pretty interesting time.
And markets are fascinating. Markets are an endless source of fascination to me.
All right. Well, you're the man. It's great to have you on. Hopefully it was fun for you. But I obviously have many more topics to discuss. But congrats on being editor heard on this. How many years is that now?
I've been editor for 3.5 years.
Well, congrats on that. It's fun talking to you. Appreciate your insights and the passion about this subject. And we'll have you on soon.
Super. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care. K-Nut.
Hey,
I knew you would like this type of stuff.
This is great.
It's different. It's not. He's an entrepreneur in a way because he's running a team and did a book. Whether you get paid up front or have a paycheck, it's very entrepreneurial to tell stories. And he's getting the hate mail. You put yourself out there, man. He does. I give him so much shit, not knowing it's him. I'll see some article from Wall Street. I go, fuck this article. And he goes, Howard, I wrote it. I go, well, the headline sucks. And I'm always apologizing to Spencer, but he has a good...
funny.
I mean, he has thick skin, which is what you have to do. He's trying to get stories out there. And there are so many angles of this GameStop saga, and it's just people, when I say education, you have to read these books. You have to read this book. You have to control your network. You have to filter. You have to just contain those emotions. And like you've done for, 20 years, you follow me. You never, and it's worked for you.
Yeah.
It may not be the best strategy for you because you haven't opened yourself up to other people, but you filter through me. It's worked.
It has
worked.
worked.
And you manage your emotions. You're not going to get rich overnight.
I realized one thing. You know how to do it. I don't.
Well, you're not comparing me to anybody. What you decided was good enough for you, and you didn't want to invest the time. And that's genius. I'm kind of jealous of that. And so people need to learn there's more than one way to do this, and you're not going to get rich overnight. Anyway, Spencer Jakab, Wall Street Journal, heard on the street. Hit me up if you want to get an intro, but he's easy to find on Twitter. This is Panic with Friends. I sit here with Canute once a week. You can search my name, Howard Lindzen, anywhere on the internet. Go to Spotify, search it. You can, and YouTube and Apple. You can search my name and subscribe. And then every Thursday morning, you'll get an alert with the new podcast that drops with venture capitalists, founders, traders, journalists like Spencer. And we talk about the future and how to invest and how to make shekels. All right, everybody. See you next week.
Howard Lindzen is the founder and general partner at Social Leverage. All opinions expressed by Howard and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Social Leverage or StockTwits. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for decisions. Guests may maintain positions in securities discussed in this podcast.
And you manage your emotions. You're not going to get rich overnight.
I realized one thing. You know how to do it. I don't.
Well, you're not comparing me to anybody. What you decided was good enough for you, and you didn't want to invest the time. And that's genius. I'm kind of jealous of that. And so people need to learn there's more than one way to do this, and you're not going to get rich overnight. Anyway, Spencer Jakab, Wall Street Journal, heard on the street. Hit me up if you want to get an intro, but he's easy to find on Twitter. This is Panic with Friends. I sit here with Canute once a week. You can search my name, Howard Lindzen, anywhere on the internet. Go to Spotify, search it. You can, and YouTube and Apple. You can search my name and subscribe. And then every Thursday morning, you'll get an alert with the new podcast that drops with venture capitalists, founders, traders, journalists like Spencer. And we talk about the future and how to invest and how to make shekels. All right, everybody. See you next week.
Howard Lindzen is the founder and general partner at Social Leverage. All opinions expressed by Howard and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Social Leverage or StockTwits. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for decisions. Guests may maintain positions in securities discussed in this podcast and should not be relied upon for decisions. Guests may maintain positions in securities discussed in this podcast.